I gotta tell you, it is really scary from here. Hello all. Thank you very much for sticking around for this talk, which is called The Art of Patience, or Why Bother? Teaching Git to a Designer. My name is Belén, and I love it when they schedule my talks right after lunch, when everybody's getting nice and sleepy. I will do my best to keep you awake, but I can't promise anything. I also got to tell you, this is a bit of a funny talk or a strange talk. You see, this is a conference about Git. Git is a version control system that is used mostly for software engineering, software development purposes. But I am not a software developer. I am an interaction designer. And to explain to you what an interaction design, what interaction design is, I have to introduce you to someone. This venerable-looking man was, sadly, Bill Moggridge. Bill Moggridge was an industrial designer. He was one of the founders of a very famous design company called IDEO, and he's credited with another Bill Verplank, with coining the term interaction design back in the 1980s. And what the Bills meant by interaction design was quite simple. It was the application of principles and techniques of industrial design to software. You see, when industrial designers go and start designing a new physical product, the first thing they think about is who is going to use this product, what people are going to use it for, why they would want to use it, and where, in which context. And it's the same with interaction design, which means that interaction designers look at software from the outside in, from the user's perspective. Because as interaction designers, we are not responsible for building software that works. That is the responsibility of software engineers. But we are responsible for building software that makes sense to the people who use it. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't say software that is easy to use. I said software that makes sense to the people who use it. And I do that very much on purpose. Because you see, some things can never be made simple. And Git is one of them. Thank you. So this is the story of how an interaction designer managed to learn Git. Now, what I'm going to tell you today is the way I learned Git. That way worked for me, but it doesn't mean it's the only way of teaching Git to a designer. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody. I don't have a bag full of magical tricks for you. I don't even have a list of best practices or anything. I just have my personal experience to share. No more and no less. And the reason why I'm here, it's because I really want to convince you all to teach Git to all designers you know. And if I succeed, if I manage to convince you, all of you will be in the position of having to teach Git to a designer. So brace yourselves, because it ain't easy. This is a story in 3 parts. I'm going to start by telling you how I learned Git. Then I'm going to tell you why I think designers should learn Git. And then I'm going to utterly embarrass myself by confessing to you all how long it took me to learn Git. You ready? Yeah? So how did I learn Git? I first came across Git about 7 years ago when I joined something called the Yocto Project. The Yocto Project is a Linux Foundation initiative that provides a set of tools for creating and maintaining customized Linux distributions for embedded devices, between them a build system. The first time I heard this sentence, I don't think I understood any of the words. Not a single one of them. Maybe the prepositions and the articles and stuff. I didn't know what Linux was. I didn't know what a distribution was. I didn't know what an embedded device was. Build system? No idea. So imagine the situation. Middle manager in big multinational tech corporation approaches Linux engineer and says to him, hey, here is this designer. She knows nothing about what you do, but she's here to help you. Yeah, right. Whatever. That's what I would have thought. But luckily for me, that Linux engineer didn't think that at all. His name was Paul Eggleton, and he's a very particular man. He didn't think, yeah, right, whatever. He thought that the Yocto Project could do with any help that came its way, including the help of a designer. And so he proceeded to teach me as much about the project as I was able to take in. One of my jobs in the Yocto Project was designing a web interface for the build system. And the Yocto Project deals with Linux things. And so they borrow a lot of tools and a lot of processes from the Linux kernel project. And one of the things they borrow is Git for version control. And this is how things more or less worked in the Yocto Project. So people worked off the master branch, and they created from it their own work in progress branches that they could commit to a work in progress repository if they wanted. And when the work was more or less ready, they would create a patch set, send it to a mailing list where the contributors to the project could review it, and once they were deemed okay, they would be merged back into the master branch. I'm sure you're all familiar with this kind of thing. So before I learned Git, every time I wanted to keep track of the progress of that we were making in building the web interface I had designed, I had to ask the developers to update the application instance they kept for me. So I had to go and say, hey, would you mind applying these changes because I'd like to look at them? That was a real pain in the ass for me. Mostly because I knew it was an even bigger pain in the ass for the developers I was working with. Yeah, they were super busy. And every time I wanted to check something new, which was pretty much all the time, they had to stop whatever it was they were doing. They had to update the instance of the application and put it to run again for me. And one day, understandably, they got sick of it. But instead of telling me to go away and stop bothering them, they decided to teach me how to do it. And I think this is the first. Oh, sorry. And this. Sorry. Yeah. And this is the first thing that I find interesting in the way I learned Git. It's that I was taught on a need-to-know basis. So basically, I was taught whatever I needed to learn at any moment in time to do my job better. And this is Paul explaining.
I wasn't really giving you a training course. I was just helping you to get your work done. And if I kind of flooded you with all this, it's like day one. Let's do a rebase. It'd be like, oh. So I think it probably really does help having someone to guide you through that step by step, and so that you can just cut to the what's important. How do we actually use this to do something useful?
So they taught me whatever I needed to know. They did not organize a big workshop or a big training session about Git. They just told me whatever I needed to know at a certain point in time to do my job better. And I think this really helped. So at that point, this is what they told me. So Belén, we have this special place where we keep all our work in progress. You need to make a local copy of that special place in your computer. And to do that, you need to type that on a terminal window. Belén, in that special place, we have these thingies called branches. The work you want to check is going to be in one of those branches, and we will tell you which one. And then you're going to need to select that branch in your local copy of the special place. And to do that, you have to type this in a terminal window. And then you run the application this way. I obviously was cloning a repo and checking out a branch, but they didn't tell me any of that. They didn't use those words. They just explained things to me in a way I could understand. And I find interesting that they did this all the time. They continuously avoided the Git jargon. Git has all this jargon that is completely incomprehensible to all non-Git people. It is very off-putting. To sum up, it scares the bejesus out of you. Right? So avoid it. Avoid it like the plague. And just try and explain things to people in terms they can understand. So after I did this, I had to learn how to update the work-in-progress branches because they were work-in-progress branches, so the developers were pushing changes to them all the time. So if I wanted to check those changes, I needed to update the branch. So they told me that to do that, I needed to use git pull. And then a few months later, they changed their mind, and they told me that I had to do Git fetch instead. You know what? They didn't explain to me why. And to be honest with you, I didn't ask either. Why? Because I don't really care. You see, I don't really care about all the intricacies of version control. I use Git on a need-to-know basis. Okay? And to this day, I'm not even very sure what's the difference between the two. And this is another good lesson. They didn't really bother that much with the concepts, particularly at the beginning. They didn't bore me with long-winded explanations about what, pull was or fetch was. And I think this is a good thing because these concepts are really, really abstract and they're really, really hard to grasp. So instead of grasping them theoretically, it is better if you just learn them progressively through practice. And that's what happened to me. It takes longer to learn, but it's a more resilient way to learn. It's a way to learn that sticks, okay? After I did that, I really wanted to start helping the developers to change little things in the interface. And to do that, I had to learn a whole bunch of new stuff. I need to learn how to create a branch. I need to learn how to commit my changes, and very importantly, how to write good commit messages. If you know how to create a branch, you also have to learn how to delete them, which, by the way, took me ages to work my head around. You need to learn how to change a commit, because sometimes you make a typo or you a horrible mistake or whatever. And you need to learn how to push those changes to a remote repository so that other people can grab them. This was a lot of stuff to learn. So every time that I needed something new, Paul would come and sit down with me and do it with me. But he didn't do it for me. He would sit down next to me, tell me what to do, and I would have to type everything and do all this stuff. And that's one of the things that I think really helped. They never did things for me. They did things with me. Because Git is just too hard to learn by observation. You need to develop muscle memory almost. And the only way to develop muscle memory is typing the commands over and over again. So never do things for your designers. Do things with your designers. Now, if you're investing the time and the effort to sitting with your designers to do things with them, what you're aiming for here is to having to do that only once for every new thing that your designers are learning. So you need to make sure that your designers are putting the best of themselves to learn on the first go. Okay? That means taking notes. So if your designer doesn't have a notepad with them or a pen, tell them to go get one. And encourage them to type those notes and keep a cheat sheet. And this was mine that very originally was called Useful Things. So yeah, make sure that they're paying attention, make sure that they're taking notes, make sure that they keep a cheat sheet so they can go back to it instead of annoying you. Okay? So I learned loads of other things after that. I learned how to initialize a local directory as a Git repository, how to handle remotes. I learned how to generate patches, how to apply patches, how to use Git send email to send those patches to our mailing lists. I learned how to rebase, and I even learned how to fix conflicts. Oh, my God. But by then, something had changed. Because I had grasped the basic concepts of Git through practice, I was spending less and less time asking my developers for advice. I had become an independent learner of Git. I had reached the point where I was able to go to the internet and find out stuff by myself. Once you reach that point, you can sit down and relax. Congratulations, you've managed to teach Git to a designer. Well done. You may have noticed something as I was telling you this story. The developers taught me how to do everything from command line. They didn't teach me how to use one of the many graphical user interfaces that exist for Git. I'm not sure why they did that, but I'm very grateful to them for doing so. Because before I learned Git with them, I had tried to use one of those graphical user interfaces, and I couldn't understand a thing. They made no sense whatsoever. And the reason why they don't make sense whatsoever is because all the graphical user interfaces for Git, they all expose Git's system model. Okay? And let me explain to you what I mean. If you talk to usability people, they will tell you that a graphical user interface should not reflect the way the system works, what they call the system model. It should reflect the way people think the system works, what is called the mental model. Mental models are often inaccurate and incomplete, but they work. They work in the sense that they allow us to get stuff done without having to know everything about everything. And so our user interfaces should always match the mental model. I think this rule of thumb kind of works in most cases. You know, for simple things like washing machines or buying books over the internet, this is fine. But I'm not sure this rule works for Git. And this is why. People who are not software developers do not have a mental model of Git. Why would they? They never use it for anything. And the software developers do not really have a mental model for Git either, because it is part of their job to learn about the system model itself. And therefore, there is no mental model that graphical user interfaces can follow. And if you look at them, they all expose the way Git works. They all expose the Git concepts. They all organize their content in repos, and they all talk about branches and patches and clones and so on and so forth. If you don't know what those things are, these interfaces do not make sense to you. They just are unusable. So teach your designers command line Git, because that will enable them to use any graphical user interface they want later on. And it doesn't matter how much they complain or moan about it. You still teach them to use command line Git. Okay? I've added a section that explains why I think designers should learn Git. And I've added it because Paul told me to.
I guess patience is really important too. But just to help the person to understand why this is important. Why should you learn how to use this tool?
You see, I'm afraid that very often, don't laugh, before you can even start teaching Git to a designer, you're going to have to convince them to learn. There are quite a lot of designers out there that truly believe that learning things like Git are not part of their jobs. Okay? I humbly, nicely disagree. I don't think designers need to know absolutely everything there is to know about version control. In the same way, designers don't need to know how to write production quality code. But designers absolutely need to know enough about software in order to make sound design decisions. Because software is their design material. This is the same as with product designers. Product designers, the people who design physical products, have a lot of materials at their disposal. There are woods and plastics and ceramics, and there is glass and fabrics and so on and so forth. Product designers don't need to know everything there is to know about those materials. They don't need to be material scientists, but they need to know enough about those materials in order to make sound design decisions about the materials they're going to use to build their products. If you're an interaction designer or you're a graphic designer creating visual assets for software, software is your design material, and you must know enough about it to make good, solid design decisions. So that involves, at least for me, understanding a little bit about version control, because version control is fundamental to the way software is built. So when you're teaching Git to a designer, designers are not really learning Git. What they are doing is learning about software as design material. The second reason why I think designers should learn Git, it's because it enables better collaboration between them and you, between designers and developers. And this is Paul talking about collaboration and participation. Because the idea is that designers should be your partners in building, okay? So this is how Paul put it.
It's really about being able to participate in the development process. If you have access to the Git repository and know how to make use of it to get your work done, then you're able to directly influence the thing that we're working on, and we're able to work together as well, because that's one of the things that Git does really well. It helps people to, if they take advantage of it, to work together, to collaborate, I suppose. So if you're not doing that, then you're kind of one layer removed. You're kind of relying on someone else to put your changes in, and this, it's just this huge barrier between you and getting your changes actually integrated.
What Paul calls the barrier, I call the wall. You see, I very often come across this way of working in software. There is a wall. On one side of the wall are the designers. On the other side of the wall are the developers. Designers on their side of the wall design their stuff, and when they're done, they throw it over the wall to the developers, and then they forget all about it. And the developers grab it, and they try to build it as best they can, but it never occurs to them to go to the other side of the wall and ask any questions they may have. Some people think that just by working in an agile way, the wall goes away. It doesn't. This is because the wall is really not made of bricks. The wall is made of attitudes. Okay? In my opinion, learning Git is one of the best ways of attacking this wall. So by teaching Git to your designers, you're not really trying to knock down the wall. It's more like digging a tunnel under the wall. It's like the sneaky way of undermining the wall. And in my experience, it's very, very effective. What you're aiming for is turning designers into your partners during the development process. Okay? So, and it's not only about being your partner. It's about being able to participate in a meaningful way. It's about being able to make an impact, to have influence. Okay?
Yeah, and if you're a designer working on a project where the developers you're working with are using Git, then as we were talking about earlier, if you don't, if you want to make changes to the software or aspects of the software, if you're not able to use Git, then you're not going to be directly participating. You're going to have to go through someone else, and that inevitably means that you're going to be somehow removed from that process. You're not going to have as much influence over the final product, and that I think would be quite frustrating. At least it would be for me. So
having influence, right? That's what you're aiming for. And the way it happened with me in the Yocto Project is that once I learned Git, I was able to impose this idea of design reviews in the mailing list. In the same way that when you send patches to a mailing list, the contributors review the code and give you feedback, people had to become used to the fact that I would take their patches, review their impact on the design, and give them feedback. And I formalized this, and they just had to live with it. Influence, okay? There is one more reason why I think teaching Git is really important. Learning Git is very important. And this one is particularly interesting for me. You see, 5 years ago at FOSDEM, the very, very few interaction designers who are involved in free software got together for the first time. And out of that meeting came something called open source design. Open source design is a group of people who are advocating for the importance of human-centered design processes in free software, and also are advocating the importance of free software to mainstream designers. We want more designers to get involved in free software, but to be frank, the barriers they face when they try to do so are just enormous. One of them is that they do not understand many of the tools that free software projects use to organize themselves, between them Git. Okay? So by teaching them Git, you're helping designers to get involved in free software. To finish, how long is it going to take to teach Git to a designer? I don't know. I can only tell you how long it took for me. And this is very embarrassing, because it took 2 full years. 2 years! But believe me, it was worth every single minute of it. So yeah, it's going to be a very long process. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a long time. But on the other side of the process, you're going to have designers that are better equipped to make design decisions for your software, designers who know how to collaborate better with you, designers that can influence in meaningful ways the development process and how things are built, and designers who can contribute to free software if they want to. And most importantly, you will have designers that will be forever grateful to you for teaching them Git. Thank you very much for listening, people.